welcome. Let me tell you how this retreat works. It has a starting point, which we're going to do right now, which comes right out of the teachings on prayer of the two founders of our founding societies, the Jesuits and the Sisters of Mercy. Catherine McAuley founded the Sisters of Mercy in 1828, and Ignatius founded the Jesuits in 1540, so it's a lot older. But both of them teach a method of prayer which is one of the great traditions of prayer in the world, but not the only one. Their starting point for prayer is pay attention to where you are in the world when you pray. Start from where you are. There are other great traditions that say the way to start prayer is to find a discipline that will remove you from excessive attention to where you are. For example, I think the Eastern traditions of prayer are much more that you enter into stillness about a kind of a state that transcends the particularities of where you are in the world. Ignatius and Catherine McAuley both say, when you want to meet God, you have to let God meet you, and therefore it's important that you pay attention to where you are. How can you be met if you're not there? That kind of a principle. I'll tell you one story from my experience that is a good example of someone who thought she knew where she was when she started a 6-day silent retreat. She was a PhD candidate at Boston College, and I was helping some PhD candidates in theology there do a 6-day silent retreat. It's about 10, 12 years ago. She came in the first day, and she explained to me that her retreat was about 3 things. It was about finishing her dissertation. She was close to being done, going on the job market, and getting married. She said, that's what my retreat is going to be about. And I said, well, okay, but try to be surprisable. Sometimes you aren't where you think you are. And that's about all I said about it. Well, I talked to her once a day, and the next day she came in, and I said, so how was your day? And she said, well, you know the big 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle down by the big fireplace? This is a rich person's old shore house that the Boston College had bought and used as a retreat center. So it was much bigger fireplace than this one. And I said, yeah, I know. And she said, I worked on the puzzle. And I said, anything else? She said, nope. I said, okay, try to be surprisable, see what happens. The next day she came in. She was a wonderfully blunt and honest person. She came in, she was blisteringly angry. She was shouting. I will not shout the way she shouted. She was not angry at me, she was angry at reality. She said she had spent the entire night weeping and raging. And then she said, I did this 2 years ago. My father died 2 years ago. This is over. And then after she had described this for a while, I said, it doesn't sound like it's over yet, does it? And she was so honest. She was terrifically honest. She said, no, it's not over. That went on for another 3 solid days. Pain and rage and grief and loss for about most of the retreat. Each day she'd come in and we'd talk about it. Not for very long. There wasn't a lot to say, except for me to say, it doesn't sound like it's over yet, is it? No, it's not. She got more and more exhausted. Finally, there was something like a change in the weather when she came in to talk to me near the end of the retreat. And she told me that she had done what she needed to do. She had gone back to the loss of her father and what it did in her family and what it did to her. And it was okay now. And she still had a day left, and you know what she did for the last day? She started praying about finishing her dissertation, getting married, and going on the job market. She wasn't very far off. She was about a week off. She thought that's where she was at the start of this retreat. The things she thought she was where she was were launch things, future-oriented things. That's what they all were. She wasn't there. She had unfinished business. So what I want to do, I want to start this retreat with a little exercise. I want to invite you to think about answers to this question. There are hundreds and hundreds of possible answers, all of them correct. The question is this: as we begin here, this is the 21st of March, I believe. As we begin here right now, where are we as a group? We're going to be together for a half day. Where are we right now? And I'll lead off with a couple of, this is, by the way, a very good way to begin prayer every day. Where am I today? So here's some where are we? We are a mix of very long-time employees and very short-time employees, a mix of trustees and employees, a mix of a visiting African leader and mostly U.S. people. That's one way to answer where we are. We're in the oldest home in this part of Detroit, for a few blocks, I just mean. But then we could say where we are has a lot to do with where each of us are. So where am I this morning? Well, I'm in the 4th day of a rotten nasal infection. I went over to the Student Wellness Center on Monday, and she checked me out and said, yeah, boy, you got infection in your ear. Bad in your nasal passages. Your throat doesn't look good. Your lungs don't sound great. Well, so that's where I am. I got up and pumped meds when I started the day. And I forgot to bring any cough drops, so we'll see if I get through the first part of this. That's where I am. Is that where I am? Yeah. Where am I? I'm in the 2nd week of a dramatic intervention in the city of Detroit's finances. That's where I am. Now, I'm in the 4th month of the 2nd term of the only African-American president in the history of the United States. That's where I am. No, I'm in the 2nd or 3rd day of spring. That's where I am. You follow me? There are lots of different ways to say where am I as I begin this retreat this morning. So I just want to invite you to surprise yourself with what comes to mind. I want to wrap this up by saying, if you want to consider an interesting habit, go to some Office Max or some kind of store, buy a notebook of a sort that you like. Physically, you like the texture of the paper, you like the shape of the book, you know, that sort of thing. And at some point in the day, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, set aside about 10 minutes, be uninterruptible. No electronic interruptions, no people walking in on you, you know, try to find an uninterrupted 10 minutes or so, sometime, about 4 or 5 times a week. Open that little book, put the date in, and then answer the question, where am I? Try to be surprised by what comes out. And if you end up writing 4 things, because the 4 things come to mind, and it kind of flows, 4 things. But suppose you're thinking of 3 or 4 things, and you get to the 2nd one, and it wants your attention. And it doesn't want you to hurry up past it, so you don't ever get to the other things that were on your mind. You just do that for 25 years, and you know what? You'll know a whole lot about how you are living in this world, and you will have given God and you a place to find you. It's not a bad way to do personal prayer. That's the end of part 1 of the retreat. The rest of this morning is structured around 2 half-hour talks and then small groups after each time. The first talk is called, What is the Noun? And this comes from a sentence I read when I started this job 7 years ago, the mission and identity job. I've been here since 1981, but I was a professor of the history of technology. That's where I started. Well, when I started this job, I started reading around saying, what do people say about mission and identity? And I came across a sentence that the Jesuits had written in a document they wrote for themselves, meaning a group of elected Jesuits called a General Congregation gathered in Rome for about 2.5 months in 1994 and talked about the worldwide state of the Jesuit order, and then they created some documents, and one was about universities. And there was a sentence in there that I like a lot. It said, we must, now the we is us Jesuits talking to us Jesuits, so the intended audience were Jesuits around the world. We must take care that the noun university and the adjective Jesuit, as in Jesuit University, be given equal emphasis. It's a very interesting way to think about the identity of a university. So basically, this morning's first talk is about the noun. What is a university? And the second talk is about the adjectives that we claim to be the main defining adjectives of UDM. So the adjectives I'll talk about are, we say we are a Catholic university, a Mercy and Jesuit university, and an urban university. So I'll talk about each of those.